thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com or telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Big thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from their website, mrvickys.co.uk, or by telephoning 01768 210 102. A big thanks also to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. They're an agile and dedicated workwear provider. Welcome back as well to United Travel. They are a UK coaches firm and they are based in the Northeast. They've got 2024 tours and you can contact them on 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Email info@unitedgrouptravel.com and they've got a website which is unitedgrouptravel.com. There's no strangers on their tours, just people you haven't met yet. Big thanks to them for their sponsorship. Big thanks as well to Media Arts, and they supply all the video technology. If you want to become a member and get a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, then get your smartphone and put it over this QR code. It will take you straight to the membership pack. It's a £25 one-off fee. You can also go to NUFC Matters website and search membership pack to book today. If you want to help the channel, then subscribe to it by hitting the subscribe button. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video and click share to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. Don't forget, we help the food bank on this channel. If you want to do so virtually, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. The Alan Shearer raffle is back on. 150 tickets, £1 a ticket. Win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball. Enter today at nufcmatters.com. We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good afternoon. Welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is the Eddie Howe press conference review for the Aston Villa home game, which is tomorrow, 5:30. Kick-off live on Sky Sports, and quite a long press conference today compared to a lot of the ones last season, almost 10 minutes longer. And Matthew Raisbeck was first up from BBC Radio Newcastle, asking Eddie, who looked fresh as a daisy, what he liked about Tino Livramento as a player. He said there's a lot to like. He's athletic, he's quick, he's box to box. He's back after a long injury. He's done all of the pre-season at Southampton. He just basically said that they need to look after him. But sounds like he's fully fit and ready to go. Razor pushed him and said, does that mean he might be eased in? He reiterated he's fully fit, he's training, there's no issues with him, but we are mindful of the load we're putting onto him, moving clubs, going into different training regimes. These kind of things can, have issues. So they are treating him, I guess, a little bit with kid gloves, but sounds like he could be chucked in at any time. Matthew then said, we've got a few right backs at the club, Kraft, Manquillo, Trippier, and now Livramento. This is the fourth right back we've got at the club. Was it really a priority? He said yes, because Kraft's injured, still is injured. He's had a long injury, and he's got to get back, to full fitness. And clearly, he said that we've only got 2 fit at the club, because Manquillo must be carrying a knock. And he said it was a priority for him. He said, "Do you see him as a right back?" He said, "Yes, he is a right back." But like most right backs, he can play left back. People who are left back seem to struggle to adapt to playing the right back role. He says he might also be able to play wide for us, but ultimately we bought him as a right back. He asked him if Fabian Schär was fit. He went, yes, he is fit and he will be in the squad. He's trained this week since Tuesday, and no problems with Fabian Schär, which is great news. He then moved on to the pre-season. He said, you've had a tough pre-season. What shape would you say you're in as a team? He went, yeah, it was intense, especially with a trip to the USA and traveling around, but I would say we are in good shape. And it was a good tournament to enter. It was a good experience and we got a lot out of it. Razor then moved on to the fact that we played Villa in the summer series in the USA and said, does that help? The fact that you've played them, you might have a feel for them, etc. And then he said, look, you take things from every game, really pre-season and friendlies. They're about fitness, they're about styles of play, but yeah, we will have gauged something from that. He then moved on to the new rules that have been brought in, and one of them, of course, which affects Newcastle's manager and assistant, Howe and Tyndall, who, of course, like to stand alongside each other in the technical area. Well, of course, with new rules coming in, that's going to be deemed unacceptable now. And he said, yeah, it's strange that's been brought in. He says it's a blow. He says, obviously, as everybody knows, there was never a plan to work that way with me and Jason. It just evolved. He says, I like to help players the best I can by being vocal and being on the touchline. And he likes to do the same with the stuff that he wants to pass on to the team. He says, I guess, we'll find a way around it. We'll rotate and we'll navigate our way through the season. Keith Downey was next from Sky. He said, it's a strange rule that's been brought in. And do you think that's in a response, to you and Jason? He says, look, it is what it is. He says, I think maybe the rule has been there, for a long time. It's just not been enforced. He says, again, we'll find a way around it. I'm sure that there'll be certain ways and means that we can do it. He said, will it not be harder for Jason, said Keith. And he says, yeah, because, he's got a natural tendency to be up and shouting and giving instructions, and being part of it. He says, but we're going to have to manage that. I don't want him sent off. And, ultimately, like I said earlier, we will find a way around it. Transfers was Keith's next topic of conversation. He went, are you pleased you got your business done early with, what's going on at the minute? Harry Kane and Casado and lots of big transfers seemingly kicking off now. When he went, yeah, he said, look, I am pleased we've got our business done early and got players in. He says, especially when you bring players in for abroad, it's important to give them that time to settle. And, he says, we've seen with Sandro Tonali coming in, he's settled well. I'm pleased with the way things have gone for him. And yeah, it is important if you can get your business done early. The next question from Keith was about the transfer window again. He just said, look, this has been a big window for you. You said it would be the biggest window, the toughest window. Is this going to be a big season and the toughest season? And he went, yeah, look, naturally you move each season. He says, you want a challenge, but, we've got to be excited about this season. We don't need to be worried about it. It's, front foot forward and right into it for us. We've got a tough start, but we're going to give it our best shot. Is the squad robust enough? Was Keith's next question with regards to bringing in the transfers that he's brought in, and he went, you never quite know. You can't really answer that question. A lot of it depends on injuries and suspensions. You can think you've got the perfect squad, and then suddenly you lose 6 players through a variety of reasons, and you find yourself struggling in a certain position. I'd love one more player, Eddie said, and then I think we'll have the ideal depth, for where we are at the moment. Have you been given assurances with regards to funds for another player? Eddie paused a bit on that one and said not 100%. He says it depends on a deal, or a player becoming available, and then what we can do. He says we might need to be creative, and we will wait and see. Andy Sixsmith was next. He said, "How are you feeling about the season?" Eddie says, "I feel good. Hopefully, I look okay," which got a bit of a laugh. He says, "I've missed the competitive games," and he said, "Hopefully, I'm still saying that in a month's time." He says, "But yeah, it's going to be a great season, and I'm thoroughly looking forward to it." Andy moved on to the documentary, the Amazon documentary. Of course, the first episode was out last night. "How much have you missed the cameras, Eddie?" said Andy. He said he's not a fan of the cameras, is he? He said, "I was forced to watch the premiere." He says, certain bits I enjoyed, but I won't be watching it. I won't be watching it in the house. And I'll just let those things happen around me, but won't be partaking a great deal. Andy then moved on and said, "This is your second full season in charge at Newcastle. Does it feel like the same club as it was when you walked in?" And he mentioned the training ground and how things had changed. He said, "Look, it's good to look back." He says, "And the change at the training ground has been phenomenal. We've come a long way." He says, and the squad, the squad's come a long way. He says, we were impressed with the squad when we first came in, and he says, we've leapt forward, and made some great progress coming from that season where we fought the Great Escape, and then moving into the situation that we find ourselves in now, which is Champions League. So yeah, he says it is exciting. He goes, "Feels like a big season, this season. Do you think the same? Do you think the same?" And he just said, "Yeah." He says, "I do." He says, "I am looking, I am looking at that. I am looking at the situation with regards to, the new season." He says, but I look at it through your eyes as a journalist." He said, "I'm not in the city all the time. I'm not at the training ground." He says, "It helps me make good decisions." He says, I want the city to be bubbling. And he says, for me personally, I just want things to move on and in a positive fashion. On Villa's big recruitment, he said, are they a big club? Are they coming back? He went, "Yes." He says, "Look at last season." He says, he says the win against us was really, really good. He says, and from our perspective, they just narrowly missed out on Champions League. He says, "We know each other well." He says, "There's a healthy respect between the teams." And, he says, "I think there's several teams in the Premier League," he says, "in the same bracket as us." He says, "The Premier League is very, very special." "What does progression look like?" said Andy. He says, "Performances." He says, "I will know when we've played well." He says, "That's what I'm looking for." He says, "Improvement in areas that I've identified." And I genuinely think, Eddie means that. It is all about the performances. He's not going to come out now and say, Newcastle United are going to finish in the Champions League. Newcastle's going to win the FA Cup. Newcastle's going to win the League Cup. He's going to keep people's feet on the ground. So performances, that's what he's looking for, and he's looking for improvement in areas that he's identified, which again is, it's good to see. I didn't catch the name of this reporter. Basically said, expectation. How are you going to manage it? Fans are excited. And he just said, "Look, I want the same as fans." He says, the big thing for me, is that the team tries and that it runs its heart into the ground, and we see desires from the players. And, I want to see pride as a baseline. I want to see the effort as a baseline. So, I think, he's playing back to the, that banner that we held up all those years ago. We just want a team that tries. And I think keeping it at that level is right. Have you set any targets? Would you say you're under promising to over deliver? And Eddie he didn't take umbrage at it, but he just said, not at all. He said, I said the same last year. He says it's about being the best that we can. We can't guarantee anything. Saudi was brought up again by this unknown journalist. Any worries about the growing Saudi league and about them buying players from the Premier League? He went, it's an interesting dynamic. He said there's been other leagues before. He says obviously we lost ESM to the Saudi league. We didn't anticipate him leaving, but I don't think it'll impact us moving forward. He pushed a little bit more on the market, the transfer market. Do you need funds? For another player? You mentioned you needed another player. He went, and would you be concerned if someone came in and made an offer for one of your players, and would you sell one of your players to the Saudi league and to fund it? And he didn't really like this area of questioning, and he was going, look, we just focus on ourselves. I don't think the league will impact on us. The journalist then asked, will it be a growing force? He went, well, who knows? Who knows? He just wanted to move on from that, and I'm surprised the journalist asked so many questions about the Saudi league. It didn't seem right. Chris was next. He said, last season, you were the team that caught people out. How will you cope not being the team that catches people out? And he went, I'm not sure that there are many teams that catch people out these days. I'm not sure there's many surprises. He says, there's all kinds of analysis available to everybody in the Premier League. And he says, I think it's more down to the fact that we had a really good run of form the year before when we stayed up, and we did it again last season. And, externally, hopes for us were quite low. Pundits were writing us off last season, whereas internally and in the club, we had high hopes. So, that's it really. Expectations, shut that off. Expectations, do you shut that off from the squad? Was Chris's next question. And he went, yeah. He says, in my shoes, he said, we say it a lot. Listening to external noise, isn't good. It can have a negative effect. So we advise the players not to do that. Chris then I said, you need one more player. What type of player? Obviously you're not going to name him, but what type? He said, hopefully one good one. But he said there's nothing close at the minute. He says, so, from our perspective, it's pointless talking about that. Damien was next, asking for an update on Joe Willock. He went, Joe's got obviously had a bad hamstring injury. He worked hard in the summer, but he felt a little bit of discomfort. So we've locked him down again, and he will be out until the first international break. Damien then said, does this feel like the biggest season in your managerial history? And he went, yes, I guess it does, but it's the eve of the kickoff, so obviously I'm going to feel like that. Jordan was next, asked about Emil Kraft, how he was doing. He went, he's doing well. He's had some good days and some bad days, but he's slowly coming round. We anticipate another 4 to 6 weeks before he is deemed fully fit. Sean Longstaff had spoken to Jordan at the Amazon documentary premiere as well, and said he felt that there would be a lot more gunning for Newcastle. I guess he meant the media. Eddie wasn't sure what he meant by that, but he said, when a team does well, you get plaudits, and if you don't, you get criticised. We use anything like that really to add fire to the belly and to motivate. Craig Hope was next and said, you mentioned about buying a player and you would have to be creative. What does that mean? He just said, look, he said, we're restricted by the financial fair play. It just means we'll have to find a different way of doing business. So he said, well, does that mean a loan? He went, yeah, those type of things, or staggered payments. He then asked him the question about the bonuses. Is there an issue with bonuses and the players in the club? He went, yes, but speaking to Lee, it's nothing, with Lee's head of media, it's nothing unusual. There has been a discussion, and we hope that there's going to be a swift conclusion. Craig then said, is there a hangover with the players with this, do you think? He went, I certainly hope not. I don't need that kind of added complication. I've seen nothing to suggest that there has been any issues. Craig then mentioned he'd done a fans event and the teams had picked Barnes over Gordon. Is that fair? He went, it's harsh to say. He says, obviously fans are going to have their opinions and pundits are going to have their opinions. He says, but we've got 2 players in each position. I would say I've got 5 or 6 hard decisions to make. He says, but you'll have to wait and see when the team sheet comes out, Craig. Scott was next. He said, does being creative mean selling a senior player, or are you loath to do that after you let ASM go? He says, if you let another player go, then you would need to bring 2 players in. That was how he answered that question. Dom then asked what his thoughts were on the new rules, which included more stoppage time. He says new rules take time to adjust. He says, I'm all for the game flowing. It's a push in the right direction, I guess, to make things quicker. He says, but, stoppages just extend the game. He says, and it adds another stress and demand. He says, but we'll wait and see how it progresses. He was then asked if loyal, he was loyal to some of the players that kept the club up. Is he going to do the same again with the players who got him into the Champions League? And he went, of course, you recognise what people have done historically for you, but he says, I approach what is, I approach each game the same. I pick the best team to win the game. So he says, sometimes I'll make a decision that surprises people, and that's why, because, it's what I see on the training ground, fitness levels, everything comes into it. But he says, of course, you want to recognise what people have done historically. He also was asked again by Dom, this is a new reality for you, really. You've signed 3 new players, but none of them are guaranteed to start on Saturday. Is that a good thing? And he went, yeah, look, he said the team finished 4th. You would be foolish to make radical changes. He said, you bring players in gradually. You bring them in if they fit into the team and they do well and they perform well and they don't get injured. He said, and they've got good form and they've got good fitness to stay in. It's as simple as that. Oscar was next. He said, what areas have you identified that you need to be better? And he went, that's not for public consumption. He says, I'll give you a bland answer, really. In and out of possession, we've identified areas that need improvement. That's all he would say. He went, internally, would you say there's any glaring weaknesses? He said, I'd say no. He says, but I think weaknesses that you may see can be linked to the style of play that you play and the risks that are attached. Interesting answer. Martin was next. He went, did the likes of opinions from the likes of Carragher and Neville fuel, do you use that to fuel the fire, as you mentioned earlier? And he went, personally, not really. He says, but if it fuels the supporters or the players, he says, I'm all for that. He says, if I got agitated by stuff like that, where they're saying we're not going to finish in the top half of the Premier League, he said, then I'd also be swayed by positive comments. And he says, I don't think it's right for me to be swayed by people. He says, people will always write us off. He says, my mantra is fear of failure. He says, that is what has always fueled me. Would you say the club's been overlooked? And he went, he says, I tend not to give that kind of thing much credence. I tend not to give it much thought. And he says, the end of the season, the table won't lie. And he was also asked by Martin, does the Jason dynamic worry you, the fact that he can't be in the technical area? And he went, no, because, look, I can drift back, he says, and I can shove him forward when things get more difficult. Lee Ryder, he said, Elliot Anderson's had a great pre-season. What's your thoughts? He went, yeah, he's been excellent. He scored goals. He's created goals. He stayed fit because he had niggles last season. He'll be a hugely important player. And whereas once upon a time he was looked as a young player getting involved with the senior squad, he's now looked at as a first-team player. And also, he talked about, basically players not being selected and how difficult is it to keep people's morale up if they're not picked on Saturday. And he went, it's always a challenge. He says, never perfect. He said, it doesn't mean someone's a bad person if they react to not being picked. He says, I want to see emotion. He says, but it's about reacting the right way. It's about respecting the team. It's about respecting the club. He says, I can only pick 11. He says, in this season, we're going to have a lot more games. It's certainly going to be a squad game. It's going to be longer games, and substitutes are going to be important. If you get one more player, is that, you said that would make you happy. If you don't get the player, how are you going to feel? And he just said, look, we'll adapt. We'll find a way. We've got to adapt, and that's just the way football is. He says, so from my perspective, he says, if we get one, fantastic. If we don't, we'll find a way around it. Fantastic stuff, as always, from Eddie. Hope you enjoyed that. And from our perspective, we will be back tonight at 5 o'clock with the 3 amigos. Look forward to seeing you then. Take care.